Hello, everybody, and welcome to Jeopardy! Tonight we've got 6 special categories for you. Those are citrus, fruits, the heroes of our modern day, Olympians from different years, spices and cooking with them, a video entry category from the celebrity Jennifer Lawrence, and mashed potatoes. All of these words will contain the letter po.
Welcome to Jeopardy! Tonight we have the 6 categories for you. Sandwiches without pickles. When to know to repair your car. Headphones by Japanese manufacturers. Doors that don't open front and back like a normal one. Microphones that were existent before electricity. And glasses of famous world figures.
Yours are always the. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. I'm one of your hosts, Hal Munger, and joining me now on the line is your other host, Julian Bernardo.
What is the line, right? What is that? What is the line?
The line that you're joining me now on? I believe that refers to a communication cable that used to be a formal line and now has dissipated into what we call the modern internet.
Okay. So I'm joining you on a series of lines, all perhaps metaphysical or electromagnetic, flowing through the air.
That would sound accurate to me.
Awesome. Welcome everybody to this great episode that we have prepared for you. This fundamental series is going pretty jive, if I do say so myself. I think the episode that we have today is a very important one, and is also a very distinctive one. I think we mentioned this on the last one that it was very distinctive to this style, but I think all of these episodes will be pretty particular. Although I want to emphasize that the skills we teach in this one are I think not extremely common in the general improv sphere, or at least not commonly showcased.
Yeah, I think that I've commonly heard them taught, less commonly heard them showcased, which is a lot of the meat of what we're hoping to get across is that you can actually showcase the things that the fundamentals. Because I think that improvisers love to talk fundamentals and then walk laughter.
Yeah. So what is our topic today then?
Our topic today is a combination of keeping up with our Muprov averageness, but in this case, we're talking obviousness, and also of this improv idea called play the expert or choose to know.
Right. This these two skills, these are things that people struggle with, I would say, often early on in an improv education, and also maybe even later on, depending on what habits start to form. But why do you think, at a baseline, like having taught this fundamentals course, in person multiple times, what part of this do you think people struggle with when learning for the first time?
I think that usually if you try to tackle either one of these things without this pairing of them, it can be very challenging.
Right.
We say your job in the scene is to play the expert and to confidently talk on a topic about which you have no expertise, even if it's just how you know your scene partner or something as simple as that. People get nervous and they're trying to think of something super clever or interesting, and their brain short wires. There are a couple improvisers I know who have a brain speed that high. It doesn't necessarily help them, but very few do. So I think expecting to get by from that is not how you want to go. And the flip side of that is that there are some people who maybe are firing on all cylinders in regards to trying to come up with crazy things and actually coming up with wild, crazy things. And it's derailing to the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you hear play the expert, initially upon hearing this, I'm thinking like, oh, okay, I'm playing the expert. I need to be able to come up with some like expert level dialogue or any sort of expert level response to what's being told. That's at least what my immediate reaction would be if I heard this. And so I totally agree that this pairing is very important. Perhaps let's talk about why each of these things on their own and kind of jointly is important to do.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think it's important to be obvious in a scene?
Because if you're not being obvious, it's going to take you a while to think up whatever non-obvious thing is going through your head.
Yeah.
And people talk about being your improv obvious. So like my obvious is different than Julian's obvious. And whatever is the first thing that pops into my head is likely going to be different or interesting in just from the way that our brains are all different from each other. But if we're setting up, 3 beats and like I saw a debate, an improvised debate where it was like supposed to be waffles versus pancakes or something like that. And the first person was like, I love waffles. And the second person said something kind of middle ground or like in between. And then the third person, but wasn't pancakes. And then the third person was like, I love eating cardboard. And it was just like, well, it derailed the fundamental like nature of the scene.
Yeah.
And sometimes doing the thing that's obvious or already set up is actually a lot more satisfying than.
Yeah, totally. Like audiences delight in kind of both things. I think often we try to, or people at least try to delight the audience by surprising them or shocking them with what you're saying, but they also delight in them seeing something for a while and kind of knowing what might come next. And then if you say the obvious thing that comes next, they will be like, oh wow, okay, I like this. It brings them delight either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times if you're like post analyzing, like, oh, why did that show mess up? This is a really good lens for that. Of like, where were the points where we diverge from the obvious things? Because we've talked a lot about how moves kind of solidify and narratives moves solidify.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes for me, at the end of a scene, there are like 2 or 3 obvious narrative moves, and those are really the only ones I'm considering.
Right.
And then someone does something like totally out of the left field that doesn't really relate to what's already happened. And it's like, oh, now that's why the show went off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is one of those hard, like untestable things too, where there's like kind of some faith you have to take when you accept this maxim into your improv and also try to teach this, which is you can never really like know what someone's obvious is or like whether they were or were not like adhering to this, because it's, it just comes down to what is like the first thing that they think of. And sometimes just like you say, there will be moments where someone perhaps is doing their obvious, but I'm like, that's wild, that's crazy, that's such a strange obvious. And I think that the fact that exists is the reason that playing this way can still produce like fun and interesting improv. It's because you don't know always what someone's obvious is going to be. And there are ways to kind of drain people's obvious such that like the next obvious that they have is kind of naturally going to be a bit out there.
Yeah, the new choice is the classic thing of forcing them to come up with a new version multiple times in a row. Because I think the part of what the obvious comes from is like, what's something that you actually thought of in that moment. So sometimes I'll like, if I'm prompted to come up with a word or something on the spot, I'll just go like Bart Simpson or whatever. Yeah. And that doesn't quite sound expert if you do it in that way, but still just starting to speak before you even know what you're talking about.
Right. And yeah, I guess let's also talk about, I think before we even introduce one exercise, let's just bring in the motivation for playing the expert as well. Mm-hmm. So playing the expert is typically going to be something that gets away from the hedging that happens in scenes. And have we defined this term for them yet? Hedging.
Let's throw out a definition.
Let's throw it out again. So, in a general sense, you feel free to chisel this into the most beautiful statue possible. But in a general sense, hedging is kind of not making a choice when like there's kind of some unknown thing that's out there that like a choice should be made in terms of defining.
Yeah, I think it's keeping multiple lanes of possibility open, but because you're afraid to sort of pick one.
Mm-hmm. So like an example, right? If you're starting a scene and there are these people who are talking to each other, and it's, for example, unclear, like we have no idea what the relationship is yet. And there are ways that you can like make a choice in this manner that are like more subtle, where you are internally making the choice and you are acting in that way. And that's different from when you're playing in that scene and you have not made a choice as to what this relationship is, and you're just kind of sitting in the ether unknown space of not having it defined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of subtlety, and it's okay if your scene partner's job is to be more perceptive than the audience and to pick up on the subtlety. And if they fail, the hope is that, like, let's say I come on, I'm thinking I'm your mother, and I act subtly in a way like I might be your mother, and my scene partner doesn't pick up on that. The hope is the audience didn't pick up on it either. And when the scene partner more clearly defines that I'm your brother, that I instantly pivot and I'm totally able to do that. Where the sort of hedging comes in, I feel like, or where it sometimes comes in, is the thing of like, oh, I'm trying to keep two realities alive at once.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm the mother or the brother here. I came and think I was the brother. I'm going to say a couple slightly more motherly things. They're going to say a couple slightly more brotherly things. And like, you get into this weird middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this is maybe a hard pill to swallow, but like you can commit hard to a truth while still not like being just absurdly like obvious about it. Like if in this mother brother dichotomy thing, you can commit hard to being the mother without saying I am your mother. And I think that maybe that is a skill that would take some time if you're learning improv for the first time, like being able to play subtly like that. And so maybe that's a bit like further down the line or second order. The main point here is that hedging is something that like the audience can often tell when you're hedging, and they want it to be defined, and it's kind of this painful thing of just like just let us know what's happening. And in general, when you're playing the expert, you're choosing to know. So you are you're not leaving out these questions that can be answered. You're kind of moving faster or moving more directly towards the logical endpoint of the scene, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when people first improvise, a lot of times their obvious is I don't know. Like the thing that's most obvious to them is we're in a scene partner and they're like, oh, what's your name? We've never met each other. And this lowers the intensity of the relationship. That's like a classic choose to know thing. And then also, they have some job. Like the classic example is like a lot of improv scenes are about baristas who don't know how to make coffee. And you're like, the whole thing is like, oh, this is my first day on the job too. Oh, this is my first day. Oh my God. Ha ha ha. And I think that what this comes down to for a lot of people is learning how to adjust your obvious to be your character's obvious, because it's actually extremely non-obvious for a barista to not know how to make coffee. Like 99% of people that you encounter who are baristas will know how to make coffee, maybe 99.999. And it's also pretty non-obvious to be on the first day of your job, because the person improvising might not themselves be a barista and might not have imagined that they're struggling. But if rather than trying to worry about how do I make this coffee, you can kind of inhabit that character who is bored, who does this routine job all the time, and really confidently even if you're using machines that aren't real and squishing pumps that don't exist and making up names of coffees and things like that, if you have that energy about you and you treat this as like, oh, this is my obvious, this is my everyday, nothing is weird about this, nothing's new about this, nothing's scary about this, then what you're doing is you're playing the expert, but you're also being a lot more obvious than trying to then justify why it is that you are working in this coffee shop when you still don't know how to make coffee.
And yeah, just I think that both of these though, playing the expert and being obvious, stop this I guess propel the scene forward in certain ways. So like or rather allow the scene to be propelled forward. So being obvious by my read would be something that like keeps the scene from coming to an end, perhaps. Like if two characters are having a conversation in the cafe about which college one of them is going to go to, and then one of them without a lot of like preparation for that reaction, like has a huge like claim, like, oh, okay, well I'm going to quit college or sorry, this isn't a great example, but if there's like a big non sequitur that comes in the scene that isn't like led up to, then it's hard to go forward in that scene. And often the right choice will just be to end it there, as like that's kind of like the peak of it.
And Julie, can I just pause you for a second?
Yeah.
I feel like just to clarify, the reason that there'd be some big non sequitur of like, I'm only applying to milk schools or I'm not applying to anywhere is because someone often gets put on the spot of like, oh, where are you applying or what are you doing? And they freeze, they don't know. And even though they know the names of hundreds of colleges, rather than just being like, oh, William and Mary or something random, they pause and are like, I don't know where I'm applying to because they're not actually applying to college.
Yeah. I think it may often be a situation like that. And so, if they do say milk college, it's like, okay, well now that's the maybe direction that the scene is going, or maybe that's just kind of like depending on where this is happening. Like this is the climax of the scene. This is where like the laugh happened. Like let's cut it here because there's not, there may not be many more choices to go after that. And so being obvious keeps the options open for or keeps like a strong foundation for something interesting to happen on top of this, be that what has already been built up in the scene so far, or some later revelation that comes more naturally.
Yeah. And it's also the difference between narrative improv and improv comedy. If your pure goal is to get laughs out of people and you don't necessarily care about the enjoyment and you don't have to sustain an hour-long show, going to milk college and seeing everyone like learn how to milk cows and stuff like might actually get some audience laughter and some joy out of it. But if your aim is to arc out characters who have interesting relationship dynamics and who the audience really cares for, it's possible that you can do that at milk college. But and like really legendary improvisers can go to milk college and keep things really grounded and like that you care about it, but it's just such a distraction and it's so tempting to then just have all these cows coming on and mooing and just lose the characters in there.
Yeah. So that's some of the kind of rationale for why playing in an obvious way can be helpful. And I might even argue that that like the comedy improv can occupy like a larger space. Like you can imagine still holding this very dearly. If the style of comedy you want to do is maybe longer and is more like oriented around the characters in the same way that like the so yeah, I guess just like narrative comedy is a thing that you can do.
Yeah, in scripted TV shows, it's pretty rare to see that type of move in a scripted comedic TV show, right?
Yeah,
you're like every once in a while, but so the assumption that kind of chaff or like whatever is going to make your improv better, I think is kind of wrong. Of like, when you have the time to think through your options, you're not going to go to Mill College. So learning how to play in a way where that's not what the show is about is useful.
Yeah, totally. And then I think playing the expert gets at it in the other way of just keeping it going. So when you're being obvious, there's like the risk you run of, for example, like you said, a lot of people's obvious is kind of like to do nothing and to ask questions. And so to counteract those tendencies, playing the expert keeps it such that we have characters who hopefully like know each other. We have characters who know like why they're in whatever situation they're in. Like think about movies or TV shows that you've seen, and how often is it like people who don't know each other and who like don't know where they are, like, and also don't know why they're talking to each other necessarily. Like, that is just not very entertaining to watch, I think would be my read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just watch like your improviser is showing is another way of saying that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it's your
because if you're struggling on stage to come up with stuff, it's one thing if you're making a choice. I want to play this character who doesn't know what's going on. That's one avenue, and it's even a choice you can make if you're a little scared as an improviser of like, oh, I'm gonna intentionally play someone, but the audience can tell if the reason that you're making that choice is that you're not making a choice and that you are incapable of doing the other thing.
Yeah. And it's I do think that the like your improviser showing is the huge thing here. Have I talked about like the improviser as magician yet?
No,
I mentioned that. Julian. So I think this might be in like one of the Johnstones or whatever, but widely held idea though that like an improviser is like the actor, the writer, and like the director, whichever grab bag of these roles you might want to take. But I've started thinking about improviser as magician as well, in the sense that with improv, often, and depending on the style, but I think, yes, with this Muprov style, you are trying to be doing something that the audience is like unsure of how it's being done. You are kind of trying to trick the audience with some sleight of hand in terms of building up these very basic skills that can somehow turn into this big narrative. Like you are trying to trick the audience in some way. And so I think that thinking about yourself as like a magician as well within the improv scene is helpful. And that's the framework with which playing the expert seems very important, is if you choose to play the expert, then it really does seem a little bit magical to the audience.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember when I was directing a new play, but I was talking a lot about the goal of being an actual magician. Because a lot of improv shows are kind of like real world magicians where there is a trick, and once you learn it, you're able to see it. So if you've done a lot of improv, you see what's going on. A lot of theaters here teach you very specific structured formats where it's actually almost like you're not improvising. There's kind of this underlying script that you can see through. And with a new play, one very frustrating thing I think for the cast members, but I was very adamant about the idea that no, we're actually going to be doing the magic, and it's going to be real, like wizarding magic. And there is not going to be any structural support or hidden tricks that we all know. This is going to be genuine, pulling the rabbit out of the hat.
Yeah, and upon hearing that, my thought is that like this concept as considered differently from like the quote unquote real world magician is just sending the tricks and stuff up one like meta level, where we prepared in a way where we don't have any specific tricks that we're doing, but we know kind of the style, or like we have the power to do it. We're training, like the one level up in terms of meta. We're like learning how to build formats or something essentially. And so, but doing that definitely obscures it even further to the audience, and especially to any improvisers, because then there's no way to put your finger on exactly what's happening here.
And one of the baseline, I think, principles that we went into New Play with was that you were never going to have your improviser be showing. I think that that's not necessarily a thing that's worth like I think there's some improv where it's really fun to play with the fact that it's an improvised form and to put people on the spot and make them have to do uncomfortable things and to take a lot of joy in that. But for this, I think that the thing of a lot of people to avoid being vulnerable kind of play above their character and it always wink at the audience like it's still an improv show. And in my first ever like improv show with the Stanford improvisers, a friend pulled up a chair in an outdoor environment, and I made a joke about them pulling up a stump. And that is something that I kind of regret. It got like a big laugh at the time, but it kind of takes you out of the reality. And I've also seen now at least 3 or 4 other people make that same joke.
Yeah.
Experiencing for the first time and be like, oh, like I'm so clever, like we're pulling up a stump or whatever. And yeah, I think it's just those kind of things that intentionally shatter the reality slightly, I think are not really worth the bang that they for their buck. I think that it's
penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah, penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah, and I think we should get into some of the specific exercises. But before we do that, I'm gonna re-up your point, or rather, say what I'm thinking, which is it comes down to who you're doing this for, right? Like, just thinking about your stump example, right? Like, if you are, let's say, like a cruise ship improviser, and you expect that maybe a lot of your audiences are like seeing improv for the first time. And your goal is to entertain them, then techniques like that, or just in general, being able to like break the reality, it doesn't matter if you do that, because they will probably still find it entertaining. You'll get the big laughs, like mentioned. And so I think that it comes down to some of our mindset, in that Hal and I care a lot about improv. We like watching improv. And I think that to some degree, I don't know how much you agree with this, but I feel like I do improv for improvisers as well. Like I want to do improv that other improvisers think is like interesting or cool. I want to wow them as well. So like part of the reason that I want to go hard on this tool set is because I think that this is a good tool set for doing that.
Yeah, I think that the cruise ship example is an example of trying to raise your floor. And that I think that there are a lot of things you can do that raise your floor and lower your ceiling. And that because improv is already financially tenuous, and people have kind of accepted a local maxima of floor, and started playing in a style where, in order to maintain that quality, there was a necessary cap on the ceiling. Yeah. And I'm always interested in learning to play in ways that have a higher ceiling, and be like, if you really practice this way, eventually this one would obviously have a higher ceiling. So why not walk down that path if I'm in it for the long haul, rather than, it's like if you're trying to learn to play guitar or something like that, there are a lot of like finger fudges that you can learn in the beginning of like, oh, I'm gonna play an F chord without the bar, or things like that. Or you can just be like, no, I'm going to try to learn this right away in the way that's going to have the higher ceiling.
Yeah. But I think that the structure of improv is often like I don't blame people for going for the floor, because like the way that it's all set up, you maybe have like one chance to do a 25-minute set at some place where, since a lot of your like leveling up will be in performing, I can see why as a group you're like, oh, we got to make sure that like every scene has like at least a few big laughs, such that you avoid doing this. But we are the missionaries who are here to show you that, oh, well, maybe there's another way that if you keep practicing this way, you can also produce something very interesting.
That's why the first episode was make mistakes, please. If you want to get better, a good way to do that is to bomb. And that was also what Patricia was kind of warning us about. She's like, are you liable to your audience, or are you liable to like this drug-like fervor that's propelling you.
Yeah.
But I don't totally buy that, because assuming that you're on an upwards trajectory, the majority, if you ever actually did garner a large audience, the majority of your audience would see you be doing things that were higher than what would otherwise be done. And probably the people who saw you flop 500 times is actually a small pool, because you were doing to like houses of 10 and whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there may be some necessary audience casualties along the way who see a really boring scene where nothing happens, but they will create theaters full of wowed improvisers and audience members alike.
Maybe.
Let's talk about some exercises.
So for teaching this and coming up with exercises, I like a lot of exercises where, because we've already been working in this make mistakes zone, you try an exercise and this exercise is too hard for the students, especially beginner students. But so you do that exercise once and you feel icky, and then you do a much easier version of the exercises that really focuses on the be obvious side of things. And it's such a relief to do that after the hard version that you can put a ton of energy and confidence and fun into it. And then slowly you can use that to rebuild back to the original difficult exercise from the perspective of the fun, obvious. So that's how a lot of these exercises are structured. And they're probably exercises that you've done before, but just that structuring is what's new.
To put a name to it, it's kind of like if you're familiar with the concept of scaffolding, but if we added one extra step right at the beginning, which is like at the highest level, where you fall from the highest level down onto the bottom staircase, and then you climb your way back up.
And it's kind of fun to like, but part of make mistakes, when I was learning how to juggle fire, like could not do it. And I'm a pretty good juggler, and I could juggle the clubs perfectly unlit. And the second you lit them, I like couldn't handle it at all. And my teacher threatened to put me in the show just holding a club, kind of waving it, unless I could do it. So I just sent it, and I caught the wrong end, like the hot part. Just fully caught the hot part in my hand, and it wasn't very bad, because it's a pretty safe activity, and they intentionally make it in a way where the flame looks as big as possible without being that hot. And after that, then it was a lot easier to.
Yeah, you need to know that like failing this will be fine, or maybe it's helpful to know that failing this will be fine before going on the journey of learning how to do it well. So yeah, some games. I think probably one of these that we're going to talk about you already heard on the warm up.
But let's do same raps or bad raps or this game, which you if you're an improviser, you probably played bad raps. How bad raps works is one person says a line like, I went to the store and I bought some eggs, bad raps, bad raps, bad raps. And then they set up a rhyme like, that spider has 8
arms.
And the goal of the other person is to say something that fits the sentence but does not rhyme.
Yeah.
This is a hard game.
Yeah. And it's very funny. Just as you say, you know, I don't know about you, but I learned this first before any other way of playing this kind of game, this rap game.
I think there's an initial moment when you start learning this game where it's not fun. You're like, oh, this is just hard. And before they reach the point where it's fun, I try to stop the exercise and be like, all right, let's try doing good raps, because good raps is just a lot easier. So same thing. I went to the store and I bought some eggs, good raps, good raps, good raps. There is a spider that has 8
legs.
Like, because in bad raps, you have to think up what they're trying to say anyway, and then you have to think up a second word on top of that. So it's actually easier to do this rhyming thing in good raps version of it.
Yeah. So the good raps, it's just it's just what you would kind of maybe initially expect out of playing this game. You're just collectively going around trying to make raps.
I think the point here is that being obvious is easier than being non-obvious.
Yeah.
And maybe the argument is that being non-obvious is more delightful or fun. And that's where bad raps comes in. And this is where same raps comes in. And Same Raps is kind of like the We Three Trees of the Raps games.
Yeah.
I love this game. I think it's by far the most fun version. I don't know anyone else who plays this game. But how it works is one person sets up a line, and then the second person does the full other line, but they have to rhyme with the same word. So, for example,
A clock on the wall tells the time.
same raps,
Rap,
same
rap,
raps,
same
same
rap.
raps. Wow, that clock just told me the time.
Same rap, same
Same
rap,
raps,
same
same
rap.
raps. And where the fun and joy and silliness comes in is even though you're saying something extremely obvious, sometimes you're literally repeating the line.
Mm-hmm.
You play the expert and you pretend that you're saying something awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is very helpful in terms of getting down like the skeleton of what you're doing in some of the other, like if your end goal is just to play bad raps, you want to get really good at that. Getting really good at same raps, you will have the rhythm of the game down very well, in terms of, you know, coming in after your partner and being big and delivering something that's confident. There's like the like hero's path that I think a lot of improvisers take in terms of getting good at something like bad raps, where they just are really bad at it and don't have fun with it for a while, until they get good at it. And then it's this like, oh yeah, now I'm good at it. And so I will, like, you know, put on the flourish and I will be confident about it. But there's kind of like an eat your dog food kind of thing, where you're forced to be bad for a while. I think that teaching it in this way, where you're giving a game that is much easier in some way, but also can be very delightful, is a great way of teaching.
Because if you want, you can play bad raps like same raps, where you come in with that much energy and jump on the final word. And sometimes you're just wrong and your word rhymes or your word it doesn't fit or whatever. But it's hard to do that if you're fearing making that mistake. And seeing the joy that can come when you let go of this idea of I'm going to be smart, I'm going to be clever, I'm going to be right. But you ramp up the I need to be physical, I need to be loud, I need to be high energy, and I need to mainly it's ramp up commitment, lower down brilliance.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of just the I think brilliance is overvalued. So much of the delight of improv can just be gained through this the flourish, the confidence, the
and you gotta do it to the point where it's funny. Like it's the same raps. Like see how big of a crazy how big people can actually go with it, and how much they can make it sound like their last word is the most brilliant thing in the world, and go around in a big circle.
And we in this series are going to talk less than maybe some other improv classes would, about playing big characters and being big and interesting and fun. But stuff like this, I think, trickles in some of that and helps people who may naturally play in a smaller way be comfortable being around everybody else and being big. So yeah, there are many vitamins that come in this package.
And the next vitamin package, we can choose. You can do this in a vitamin way. You can do this in a non-vitamin way, but is exercises that force you to list a series of things. One of these exercises is tonight's specials, which is the vitamin version, where you're a restaurateur who has to list off all the specialty foods of the evening in a row. And another one is Jeopardy, where you're a Jeopardy host and you have to list all the categories the 6 categories that you're listening to.
Yeah, I've heard it as like Oscar nominees, where you're listing the 6 Oscar nominated movies and the associated actors. But yeah, this is you know, if you know, which I'm sure you do, if you listen to the podcast, at least if you know about 3 things, this is kind of a version of that, where we're just kind of picking a category that is like relatively fruitful. They could have a lot of potential answers. And we are trying to just name things within this category.
And ultimately, here's a hedging thing. If you have to list the specials of a menu, it's not like you don't know what things might be on a menu. It's not like you
Right.
don't know food,
Hmm.
but trying to choose the right ones or make it interesting is like somehow really challenging. So instead, just trying to be like, no, I'm trying to be like a real waiter and
Hmm.
list off tonight's specials is kind of a more fun challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Do you want to try this cringe hard version right away, Julian?
yeah. Let's do the reverse scaffolding
All
thing.
right. You join, I'm throwing you in. You're going to have to make a menu right now.
Oh, the menu for today. Let me read it out for you. On the appetizers, we are going to have fries. You can choose to add cheese for an extra $2. We also have onion rings and a Caesar salad. Among the entrees, there is a salmon souffle filet that comes with salmon, pilaf rice, fried vegetables, and a garnish of parsley. We also have ribeye tenderloin, which will come with a tough ribeye cooked to your choice of temperature internally. And finally, for the entrees, we have a chicken sandwich, which will come on a piece of brioche bun with fried chicken. If you're interested in our dessert options, we do have chocolate lava cake that has molten lava coming outside of it in the form of some hot chocolate, and a Benedict souffle, which comes with ice cream and a cinnamon stick.
All right, Julian. Admirable job. But still, that seemed challenging. How'd that
Yeah, it
feel?
was challenging. It was hard for me. Like I would have liked, and maybe I'd started I don't even know if I started, but I would have liked to have, delivered it like a waiter and put more of the juice or the speckle onto it. But it's just a hard task to be asked, and so I delivered it pretty neutrally. Um, it's quite hard.
So, as we do on the show, we're going to make the load lighter. And there are two ways you can do this. One of them is to replace all the specials with just, insert words like, oh, tonight's specials are special number one, special number two. Special number two is special because it has a side of special number three and also has a little more special number four sprinkled on top or whatever. It was grown in a farm that was famous for special number five. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But insert filler words. And another way you can do this is do this entirely in gibberish or in the Muprov Musings mumumish. We use this for mumalogs in Shakespeare, but it's essentially that kind of delivery of the specials.
Yeah, and just to echo how this fits into the paradigm, you're dialing down the brilliance, you're dialing down the mental power that it takes to come up with just different food items, which might not sound like a lot, but maybe a lot. And as a result of lifting that weight, you are able to go hard on just as you did, like perhaps delivering it like a very impassioned waiter who cares a lot about these foods and is able to just put some flourish and some spice onto it, and
Yeah.
then you start layering back on the brilliance.
And it doesn't even have to be like an impassioned one. Like that's one obvious lever that you can put up. But even though you're like, like it's just you're making character choices and in the
Mm,
point is the way in which you're speaking. And then
yeah,
the thing that you do is you layer on to that exact delivery with those exact same hand motions and the exact same tone. You're like, yeah, so I guess tonight, if you want the specials, we do have this artichoke pasta that tastes all right. I try to grab some of it off the trays when I can. But honestly, I would just go for the peas, which is our normal special that's every day of the week. You know, not coming up with the actual words I said there. If the delivery was bad, it was like there's artichoke pasta or peas every day of the week. Not a good.
Yeah, and so there's these intermediary level ups that we can do to help with this, right? Of mixing in some of the real but then keeping some of the fake. Uh,
Scaffolding.
yeah, yeah. So you called it earlier when we were talking half Jeopardy, which I think is just a funny name if you're doing the Jeopardy list of things to name, but you can start delivering some of the real world words, but then include some of the filler words. So maybe it's actually best for continuity if you try this again with the character that you just did, but more at length with the ability to include some of these.
Yeah. So tonight we have a couple specials like special one and artichoke pasta and special two. I'm very into the flavor of special three, but honestly, the strawberry cream you can get for dessert is to die for. So I've thought multiple times that if I did die at my funeral, I would want them to serve special five because it is honestly so delicious and it pairs really well with anything on the wine list, especially the Chardonnay.
Yeah.
I relied pretty heavily on the using, special, using those numbers there because I was having trouble coming up with stuff. So you
Yeah.
can slowly ratchet it up. But the idea is to do some combination of just using special one, special two, special three, and using real things. And whenever you feel even the slightest bit of mental strain, you go back to.
Yeah, totally. What an analogy I'll draw here, just because it's key on the mind, is right now I'm learning to play guitar, and often I've seen stuff about when you're playing a song, always make sure that you're keeping your rhythm and like you're strumming consistent, and it's fine if like you're changing chords and you just let all of the open strings ring out for a couple strums or so, and that's preferable to trying to kind of stop the rhythm in order to get the fingering right and then play the right chord. So it's the same kind of thing going on here where the like structure of what's happening of delivering this line and in this with this rhythm or color or whatever you want to call it of the character that you choose. This is like the thing that you're keeping consistent, and you're trying to do the other thing. You're trying to include the fun details of what the actual foods are. But sometimes just in order to keep with the character that you've chosen, you might have to just say something that's generic.
And you can do this in scenes too if you want to go crazy. Like you can do full on improv scenes where whenever you're struggling at all, you just go into gibberish and focus more on the texture of it.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, it's all a spectrum, right? Like you don't literally have to go into gibberish. You can, and that could be awesome, but you can just kind of this might take some time to build if you aren't like kind of experienced improviser perhaps, but you can go in and out of how much you're focusing on different things. Like you might find yourself in a scene thinking really hard about some of the specifics, and you can just make the choice to stop doing that and start, I guess, devoting more of your mental energy towards how you're standing and all that kind of stuff. So this is something that I feel like I continue to do, is just reallocate where I'm spending my energy.
Yeah, for a new play, a lot of our practices, we intentionally did scenes that didn't make any sense whatsoever. Where you were trying to have the emotional core and like it to feel like a conversation between two people, but the words didn't really, they didn't like coalesce into anything that was understandable. And again, that sounds like maybe a more advanced thing that you try on the fringe end of your learning. But what's fun about this intro series is that I was, had a lot of creative control when I was teaching it. And, this is literally day 3. The first times they start doing scenes, they've already done shared memory. Now we hop into just like conversations between them as real people where you just start lying about stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm actually a professional speed skater. And then if the
Yeah.
other person asks you more about it, you just continue to lie. And it doesn't matter if what you're saying is true. It doesn't matter even if the other person can tell it's not true, but they're going to act like your lie is true. And rather than trying to list off true facts about speed skating, you're trying to act like someone who knows things about speed skating.
Yeah.
Do you want to try that, Julian?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So you're going to just tell me that you're something that you're not, and I'll kind of ask you some questions and you'll just.
Okay. I am, I keep a lot of cats, and I know very well how to take care of them and whatnot.
Oh, tell me about it. I used to have a lot of cats myself. Do you read Barber's Guide for the Cat Lovers?
I've read through Barber's Guide for the Cat Lovers. Yeah, it's a pretty good one to just understand like the basic preparations you need for them. But there are some other resources that I like as well. A lot of
Like
websites.
what?
I go to different forums, so like it sounds basic, but just Reddit r cats has some good information. On the sidebar, there's like a mega thread about cat taking care of techniques. But through that, they have a resources page, and the website, I think it's mamahinkley.com. But there's a lot of tips for when you have a lot of cats, basically how to make sure that they don't fight each other, how to deal with the fact, they might be breeding and whatnot. Some helpful tips like that.
What's your like highest number that you've gotten up to?
At one time, I mean, there were some days where I had 23 cats here.
Whoa, that's in a different charter than me. I've maxed at 8.
Yeah. So when I say days, like sometimes, so I, as a cat person, am the one who is often like asked to cat sit for friends and whatnot. And so that can definitely add up. I've only like been, like fostering at a given time, probably up to like 12 cats.
Yeah. But it gets hard because let me guess, you started out fostering like 4s, and it's hard to say no because like when I read about, did you see that piece in the New York Times? It's horrible about cat mills.
Oh, yes.
It just that kind of thing makes my heart like drop. And that was actually when we got Stevie. Just because I just read it and I was like, I know I don't have room for another cat, but sometimes you think you don't have room and then you just have to make more room. And so it's not really like a scene. You're not progressing like some big emotional thing, but the point is just getting used to lying.
Yeah, used to saying the not truth.
And don't use this in the real world.
Not for evil, at least. Yeah. I do think that like the being obvious and playing the expert plays a big part in my real life, and perhaps in the like math or the stats of it all, where often there's like a problem to solve, right? Like we need to show that this estimator is unbiased. These are all just like terms with mathematical definitions. And a lot of people will, I find, like when just working on these problems, sit there and be like, but how do we prove that? How do we prove that? And they will keep the obvious moves, like maybe in their head, they're trying to do the obvious moves and like find the like 3 steps down the way, like what this will turn into. But I've found a lot of success in my approach of just like literally writing on the whiteboard the first obvious thing, which is, unbiased implies that the expectation of this is this. And then from there, just like getting the facts out, and often I feel like getting to the answer quicker because I'm not waiting for the big realization to come. I think there's kind of like a genius mentality sometimes in like math and stats where it's like, I only want to speak up when I have the full proof. And then I'll say a very like, intellectually and beautifully like, well, it's unbiased, therefore we can apply this and hence it's true. Whereas it's often way more illuminating and easier to do to step by step say, it's unbiased. So this part is true. So this part is true. So this part is true. If these parts are true, maybe we can use this theorem. And with this theorem, we can, consider like this. And so it's true. So it maybe feels a little bit like dumber, but I don't know. I think that the improv helps me do that.
Yeah, that's a big thing in the art world as well. where it's really hard to be like, oh, I'm going to come up with some super creative original thing right now from scratch. And a lot of times people are paralyzed by that desire and they don't just like start drawing or like they're not willing to do. I just know a lot of creatives who are frozen. Patricia Ryan Madson, founding simp, famously has a bad art club where you're not allowed to make good art. You just come and you're nothing is allowed to be like, oh, this might be some brilliant thing. You're like, no, we're all gathering, and the point is that we enjoy creating together, and we're not trying to make. So that's kind of an awesome takeaway from this be obvious, be average thing as well. Of like, no, just get into the practice of doing and starting, and not worrying so much about it being perfect.
I think we should wrap soon, but there's one more thing that I wanted to mention about like kind of the sides of the spectrum of students. But was there anything else that you think we should include before we wrap?
Mainly the like after cringe as well. I still do this. This is one of the hardest improv skills to get rid of, but a lot of people like manage to get the thing out of their head and then they cringe afterwards, or they manage to get the thing out of their head, but they start with like a, oh God, this might not be good. Like, okay. And yeah, just, I think that's one of the coolest things to work on, is to be able to say something that might make you actually cringe, but just say it with confidence and get it out of your mouth and not act like you made a mistake. So it's this weird thing of make mistakes, please, but don't act like you made a mistake.
For me, it's always a little bit cringe whenever I see improvisers up there, making the call very confidently, but then maybe they return to the back line and they're like, I don't like it. The final thing I wanted to touch on was, if you find yourself teaching this course, and there are mostly people who are new to improv, there are going to be people on both sides of the spectrum that find this hard. And the spectrum that I refer to is basically on one side, you might have people who find this difficult because they want to say something that's very interesting. They're here in the improv class. They want to be funny. They want to like say something. It's hard for them not to be like funny or interesting. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you'll have people who have a hard time with this because they just in general have a hard time kind of saying anything. In both of these, I think, come from the same place of there is a mental block. Both of these have the obvious stuff in their head. They can certainly conjure this up if necessary. But for the former, it might be that this doesn't pass their like mental wall of what's appropriate because it's not funny enough. And for the latter, there just might in general be other reasons like stage fright or just lack of comfort in front of the group that leads them to not be able to say these things. How have you dealt with both of these groups differently or the same?
When evaluating improv potential, which is something that I do, I think that for me, someone who falls more into the latter camp where they're afraid to say stuff is someone who I think has more potential to learn from me well. And that's primarily because it is very fun to encourage someone to say more. They do a little thing right and you're like, yes, go. Like you like build up your confidence. That's an enjoyable thing to do as a teacher. For someone who has the issue where they come on stage way too much and make tons of jokes, maybe it's still stemming from the same insecurity of like, I'm nervous. But it's harder because what you're trying to do is get them to do less and be like, be simpler. No. And what you're kind of saying to them is a lot of times like, no, like rein that in. Honestly, it's just to like trust in the exercise. Cause a lot of people I think treat fundamentals, intro or whatever as, this is just the thing I have to get done to be able to do the real stuff. And I see these real improvisers breaking all these rules and et cetera, et cetera. So really what it is about buy-in, because it's not that hard to go from, I'm saying something super complex and interesting to I'm just saying 3 colors, red, blue, yellow. But for some people, that very short leap is really just one they can't make. And you're like, say the most obvious thing. And they're like turquoise, poop brown, and silly color. And you're just like, they can't say red, red, red or whatever.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And these are all valid student populations that you might be facing. We should probably wrap, but the final thing that I want to make sure that everybody keeps in mind is the role of joy in improv. We definitely are teaching something that is unintuitive to people and could be annoying or frustrating for people if they're trying to learn, and especially if they've like already learned some improv from some other source. This might be hard for them. And that we want to push on those things that are hard, and because those are growing moments. But just as a teacher, remember, a lot of people are doing improv to have fun and have joy. And so try to find the great compromise between things that are going to push people and things that people actually enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where the same reps energy comes in. And where the thing where if you get the person who's coming up with a little goofy stuff to say something obvious, like giving a ton of encouragement for that, of like,
yeah.
This is a juggling metaphor as well, where every time they make a mistake in the right direction, you cheer them and you're like, yes, all your throws were perfect. You missed all the catches. Yes. And every time they make a good thing in the wrong direction, where it's like, oh, whoa, you actually did 2 awesome catches, but not in the way that's going to help you learn how to juggle. You're like, you don't give them any reward for that. So it's this weird, special training of making sure you're actually rewarding the things that you want to reward.
Yeah. Reward what they need, not necessarily what's like closest to the truth or the best.
Because they already get a reward for that. That's honestly hurting them.
Yeah.
Of like the laughter that immediately comes out of the audience, or just the feeling of like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah. This is an important maxim. And honestly, playing the expert, I use it so much in my daily life. So please do it. Please heed our warnings and our exercises.
Mm-hmm. All right. Then without further ado, or without further ado, this has been Muprov
Musings. Okay, so my sign off is you might be thinking you know what my sign off is, but I think I'm going to do a different sign off than what you are thinking. So you might be thinking that my sign off is going to be about my improv showcase that I did recently. But no, I'm gonna sign off what happened yesterday here, which was quite fun and interesting. Which was, so I'm in like a stats PhD program, and yesterday was the visit day, where all of the admitted applicants for next year got to come visit campus, and we were showing them around and talking to them about the program, and it's fun because it's a moment where the department kind of pulls out all the stops, and they like, pay big money to fly all these people out, and they put them up in hotels. And it was very fun being on the side of like come here, come attend our program. Yeah.
Did it make you feel like more of a part of the program now to be on the other side of that?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely gives some closeness to the program when there's all these people who are who are interested in it, but like I know way more than them. Because, usually I'm comparing myself to like the fourth years who are, very ingrained here. But whenever there's just new blood, it's like, okay, I guess I really am part of this thing. So yeah, and it's always a fun balance of trying to be positive about the place and also just be honest about the place.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily I have mostly positive things to say about our program, but yeah, it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of like doing your first audition from the other side.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, and it's fun to. I was having fun asking people because I don't know why it feels like such a taboo, or I guess I could think about why, but I was asking a lot of people. I was just being straight up. I went, okay, you don't have to answer, but are you considering other options, and what other options are you considering? Because it like with a lot of the Visit Day stuff, it feels like a little bit of a taboo. Like, oh, I'm not gonna say that I'm also considering this other school. But I don't know. I was just trying to cut to it. So and just speak to them as people, right? Because there's no. I'm not a droid from my university.
That's funny. Yeah. Did they do the thing that we had to do with Sims where all your bits were reset to be more inclusive?
There is not a wealth of bits that exist in the stats program, so we didn't do that. And to be honest, I think that we took the opposite approach of trying to convey that we are a group of people who have a lot of fun together. And I think we tried to convey like, oh yeah, there was this time that we did this and that and this and that to show them that they may also get those experiences if they come here.
Right, well, so no need to reset your improv group's bit to be
direct translation.
Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now?